So we've all probably experienced going out on a ride and just not having it in the legs. The legs are super heavy, feeling like lead. Today we're going to go through the 3 most important factors you can concentrate on to improve your recovery, to therefore improve your performance on the bike. Let's go. So there's so many what I like to call sexy recovery methods out there, and these sort of sexy recovery methods are things like massage guns and expensive recovery shakes and special stretches to enhance stimulation to certain muscle groups. And all these things aren't really backed by science, they're usually backed by a company trying to sell you a product. There's only actually a few elements, and 3 of those we're going to go into today, that actually will have a big impact on your recovery. All those little sexy recovery methods, you know, are great if you're an elite athlete and you've already got all the other factors nailed. But for us average cyclists, they're not actually going to have too much of an impact. If you've ever heard of the 80-20 rule, it's kind of doing 20% of the things and they're going to have 80% of the impact. So it's the same with these 3 methods. If you focus on these 3 things and 3 elements, it means that you're probably focusing on 20% of the things you can, but it's actually going to reward you in terms of 80% of the recovery benefit. So strategy number 1 is something you're probably already doing, but not really optimizing for efficient recovery, is sleep. Now, sleep is hugely important and is known as the pivotal pillar in health and wellness. If you're not sleeping enough, it means your nutrition is going to be impacted. There's been lots of studies to show that you're going to consume more sugary foods, higher fat foods, because your hormones are going to be all out of whack if you haven't slept enough. Your performance will also decrease, so during your sessions, the time at which you reach exhaustion, which if you're doing hard intervals you will reach, can be impacted as well. So it means you're going to not be able to exercise as intensely if you haven't slept enough. You're at risk of injury that little bit more. Your motivation will be reduced. We've all probably had it before, you know. You've not slept too well the night before and you just can't bother to do the session. That is why. Your hormones are all impacted, your cognitive function is impacted. There's so many things that sleep impacts that it is the pivotal pillar. And if you're not sleeping well, doesn't matter what else you're doing for recovery, it's probably not going to have too much of an effect. So how much do we need to sleep? Well, sleep is obviously important. We sleep for around 26 years of our life, but we need around 7.5 to 8 hours per night to function optimally. But the average person in the UK only gets around 6 hours and 20 minutes. But 9 out of 10 of us claim we love sleep, so there's some kind of disconnect there. How can we then improve our sleep to make sure we're performing well on the bike? Well, there's the 3-2-1 method, which I'd like to go through with you. To start off with, 3 means 3 hours before you go to bed, you want to start reducing the amount of intense exercise you're doing. So if you're doing any sessions, or intense sessions at least, try to keep them over 3 hours before bed. Those sessions can increase your metabolism, and if you're trying to go to sleep and have just done like an intense session on the bike, probably not going to help you too much. 2 hours before going to bed, you then want to reduce the amount of food you're consuming. Consuming lots of food will again boost your metabolism and also makes you feel uncomfortable while lying down trying to go to sleep. So don't eat heavy meals or large amounts of food 2 hours before bed. And 2 hours before bed, you also want to reduce the amount of light that you're taking in. Your body secretes something called melatonin, which makes you feel sleepy, and taking in blue light from screens or the sun typically means that melatonin secretion will be reduced. So it means you're going to feel less sleepy going towards bedtime. So if you can reduce the amount you're looking at screens, turn on some dimmer lights or light some candles, or maybe even get yourself some blue light blocking glasses to help reduce the amount of blue light you're taking in 2 hours before bed, will really kind of help you feel more sleepy and help you gradually wind down as it gets closer to bedtime. 1 hour before bed, you really want to start to try and wind down. So try to stop the amount of stimulating activities or the amount of screen time, the amount of things that are just stimulating you. You want to reduce that 1 hour before bed. So reading a good book, for example, is a really great way to wind down, as long as the book's not too exciting. I've done it before, and you've probably done it before, you know, watching YouTube. Maybe you're watching this YouTube video before bed, or watching Netflix before bed. That's actually stimulating you, as well as sort of shoving blue lights into your eyes, as we went through in point number 2. So try to really reduce the amount of stimulation you're getting 1 hour before bed, however you'd like to do so. Reading is one I go to. I just read some kind of comic book or comic strip or something like that, just to really help you wind down before bed and really bore yourself so that you kind of want to go to sleep. Another 2 big elements to focus on to sleep well, to improve your performance and improve your recovery, is caffeine and alcohol. Now, as a cyclist, we all probably drink a little bit too much caffeine, but ideally not consuming any caffeine after 12 o'clock in the afternoon is going to really help. Caffeine has what we call a half-life, as any kind of radioactive substance does. So the amount of caffeine you ingest has a kind of period at which it reduces in the system. So if you have a coffee at 12 o'clock, for example, a quarter of that coffee, or that caffeine in the coffee, will be in your system at 12 o'clock at night when you're trying to go to sleep. So if you have a super duper strong coffee at 3 in the afternoon, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're still going to have a quarter amount of that caffeine in your system. So reducing the amount of caffeine you have overall, maybe going to decaf versions, but also try not to have too much caffeine, or any caffeine if possible, after 12 o'clock in the afternoon is probably a really good place to start. Now you might be saying, you know, I can have a coffee before going to bed and be completely fine and sleep completely fine. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't fall asleep. It means that the recovery and the REM sleep, and the really important sleep, is affected. So you'll find if you have a coffee later on in the day, you might fall asleep perfectly fine, but the quality of your sleep and the amount of recovery you're getting during that sleep is going to really be impacted. As I said, alcohol can also have a similar effect in the amount of recovery we get from our sleep. So if you have a lot of alcohol later on at night, then that, again, alcohol actually helps you go to sleep. It knocks you out, as we all probably know, but the amount of recovery you're getting during that sleep is going to be vastly reduced, and there's lots of evidence to support that. That's why when you wake up after a hangover, for example, you feel as if you've gotten no sleep, even though you might have slept for 12 hours. So my advice would be everything in moderation. Just know that if you are having a heavy session the night before a training session, or even the day before a session, you're probably not going to perform to your best. But sometimes that's okay. Just want to enjoy ourselves and have fun. There are also lots of other little tips that can help you sleep well, such as maintaining a colder temperature in your room. Keeping your bedroom dark is another one. The final tip is to create some kind of routine and try to keep that every single day. And also try to keep the same time you go to sleep and the same time you wake up, even at the weekends if possible. We've all probably been trying to go to sleep on a Sunday night and just sat there not able to go to sleep. Part of that is to do with, you know, pretty much nervous for the start of the week on a Monday, but also because over the weekend you've probably gotten into a different sleeping routine. So then when you try to go to bed early, as you normally do on a Sunday, you're not able to get to sleep. So ideally, if you can keep the same bedtime and waking time, even at the weekend, that's really going to help out, or at least as much as possible. Element number 2 to focus on is nutrition. And of course, we're talking about off the bike nutrition here because we're talking about recovery. When we hear about recovery in terms of nutrition after cycling, we all assume, you know, it's the hour after exercise. We need to make sure we get some carbohydrates and protein in within that, what we call an anabolic window, straight after exercise or straight after cycling. That's really going to help us recover. And that is true to some degree, but it's more important what you do for those other 23 hours after cycling as well. So ideally we want one palm-sized amount of protein in every single meal. That's the first port of call. It doesn't matter if you're getting in a protein shake and carbohydrates straight after exercise. If you're not getting enough protein in across the course of a whole day, doesn't matter what you're doing straight after cycling really. That includes breakfast, so you know that just that milk with a bit of cereal, it's probably not going to cut it. Make sure you're getting some yogurt or some cheese or some nuts in with your breakfast to try and get some kind of protein source in there. And then the same goes for lunch, and then the same dinner, but breakfast is typically one we don't include too much protein in because it's easy to just have, you know, cereal or some porridge without any source of protein. If you're someone who likes numbers, as an endurance athlete, we want to have around 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day. So whatever your body weight is, so imagine I'm 100 kilos, which I'm not, but if I weighed 100 kilograms, all I'm going to do is times that by 1.6. So 160 grams of protein, if I weighed 100 kilos, is how much I would need across the course of a day as an endurance athlete, as a cyclist, to help recover optimally. So trying to split that across the course of 3 meals and some snacks is the best way to do it, not just focusing on that hour post-ride. As cyclists, we also want to include carbohydrates within each meal as well. Make sure we're replacing that lost muscle glycogen, that sugar in the muscle that we've expended during riding, so having some kind of complex carbohydrates, and by complex I kind of mean whole wheats and brown versions, so like brown bread or whole grain pasta or whole grain rice as opposed to white rice, white bread. How much in terms of carbohydrates should we be having per meal? Well, around about 2 cupped handfuls of vegetables, of carbohydrates, so pastas, rice, oats, all those sorts of foods are going to be great to include within each meal. And of course, the government's recommendation of 5 sources of fruit and veg also comes into play here. This is really important to help get our micronutrients in, so all those vitamins and minerals we also need, which we don't necessarily just get from protein and carbs, help stave off any illnesses or infections and just help us recover as a whole. However, if you can, once you've got the rest of the day sorted and you've got your diet and nutrition nailed, then we can start looking at nutrition straight after exercise. And straight after exercise, we want to be getting in a good quality source of protein. You know, protein shakes are common for this one, but you don't have to go to protein shakes. You can have a natural source such as yogurts or you know, peanut butter or nuts. Things like that are really great straight after training. Including around about 25 to 30 grams of protein straight after a ride is really going to help your muscles repair and recover. You also want a good source of carbohydrates, again, to replenish that muscle glycogen, that muscle sugar that you've lost during the ride. If you're a stats person, 1.1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight straight after training is really going to help you out replenish that. And straight after riding, we want it to be non-complex. So ideally staying away from the brown versions, those versions that digest a little bit more slowly. So we want the white versions or just the more readily digestible, the more sugary foods. So a common one, a professional cyclist, is like jam and peanut butter on toast after a ride, because you know you've got the bread there which contains some carbohydrates, the jam which is, you know, really sugary, it's going to help replenish those sugar stores really quickly, and also has some peanut butter on there to help, you know, rebuild those muscle fibers that we've torn during exercise. 2 down, 1 to go. So the final and third element of recovering well is actually not recovering well, but planning your training efficiently and effectively so you allow time for recovery. Doesn't matter if you're sleeping well or eating well. If you're doing 3 super hard sessions back to back, then you're not going to be able to perform well and your body's not going to have enough time to recover. So therefore, making sure your training is planned correctly and efficiently is really, really important. So for example, even if you were just doing 2 or 3 bike sessions per week, you want to spread those out across the course of a week to allow your body time to recover. If you're, for example, someone like myself who does 4 bike rides per week, then you need to really start looking at what sessions you're doing and when you are doing them. So for example, if you're trying to fit 4 sessions or 4 rides in across the course of an average week, then of course we want to try and split them up as much as possible. So Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday might be a really good option. You can see I've got a rest day in between each day of cycling. But if I want to fit a 4th day in, if these rides are really hard and really intense, my 4th ride is probably going to be a recovery ride. So just a nice steady ride at zone 2, not a very high heart rate. So for example, I might do that on a Sunday. Still allows me for a day's recovery on the Monday, but it just means that it allows me to get a 4th cycle in, but it means that I'm not going to be really struggling trying to do a super hard session on a Sunday after I've also done a super hard session on a Saturday. Making sure you try to stick to the same schedule each week will also help your body adapt and help you stay consistent. Of course, we all have things that are going to come up, meetings that stop us going out on a ride, or family commitments that suddenly pop up that mean we have to bin that ride for the day. And then trying to fit it maybe the day afterwards when you weren't going to ride is maybe the way forwards. But trying to consistently hit the same schedule each week will mean your body gets used to the schedule. And if you design a good schedule, like you said, trying to split your cycles and your bike rides up evenly across the course of a week and making sure you're not doing 2 or 3 days of really hard work back to back means that your body's going to have plenty of time to recover, and it means that you're going to sustainably improve your fitness over the course of time. So that's week on week, but another thing you might want to keep in mind as well is how you're doing over the course of months and even the year. So for example, my routine is I'll do 3 really hard weeks. Again, during those weeks, my training's split up nice and evenly. But once I've finished my 3rd week, I'll then have a lighter recovery week just to help my body recover. If you're doing super hard weeks, even if they're well split up, super hard weeks back to back to back to back, not having any kind of significant recovery periods, your body is going to start to break down and struggle. From that week off is not necessarily not doing anything, it's just including less intensity. So maybe instead of doing 3 intense cycles, you only do 1 intense cycle and the other rides are nice and steady for a week. So there you have it, the 3 most important elements when it comes to recovery and training well as a cyclist. There are, of course, as I said, other things you can be doing. They're just not going to have as much of an impact. So it's better off focusing on those three main elements. Once you've got them absolutely nailed, you're getting enough sleep, you're eating well, and your training's planned correctly, then you can focus on things like stretching, for example. And please do click up here for some effective stretches for cyclists that I filmed a couple of weeks ago. And then, of course, other things like cryotherapy and recovery boots and things are obviously all going to help, but you're going to have a really, really small impact in terms of your overall recovery. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you found this useful and you now have some tools and techniques that you can use to really help improve your recovery and therefore improve your performance on the bike. Please do like the video, it really does help, and subscribe to the channel for new exciting videos such as this every single week. And I will see you next week in the next video. Thanks for watching.